Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another amazing episode of the Stephen Jarvis and Friend. Every time, every time I say that. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another amazing episode of the Jarvis podcast. Got myself that time. Um, Today I will be talking about the 1974 hit classic film Black Christmas and how it kind of revolutionized the slasher genre, even though the slasher genre wouldn't be a thing until 1978 with the movie called Halloween. But we are talking about Black Christmas. So let's get into it. Black Christmas, originally titled Silent Night, Evil Night in the United States, and retitled Stranger in the House on television screenings, is a 1974 Canadian slasher film produced and directed by Bob Clark and written by A. Roy Moore. It stars Olivia Hussey, Kier Duella, Margaret Kidder, Andrea Martin, Lynn Griffin, and John Saxton. The story follows a group of sorority sisters who receive threatening phone calls and are eventually stalked and murdered by a deranged killer during the Christmas season. Inspired by the urban legend The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs, and a series of murders that took place in the Westmount neighborhood of Montreal, Quebec, Canada, Moore wrote the screenplay under the title Stop Me. The filmmakers made numerous alterations to the script, primarily the shifting to a university setting with young adult characters. It was shot in Toronto in 1974 on an estimated budget of $686,000 and was distributed by Warner Brothers in North America. Upon its release, Black Christmas received mixed reviews, but it has since received critical reappraisal, with film historians noting it for being one of the earliest slasher films. It is also praised for its influence on John Carpenter's Halloween. Aside from its earning a cult following since its release, a novelization written by Lee Hayes was published in 1976. It is the first film in the Black Christmas series, being followed by two remakes in 2006 and in 2019. And this movie starts with an unnamed man walking through um a town where he climbs the exterior of a sorority house where a Christmas party is being held and enters the attic. Well, the house phone rings, and one of the sorority sisters by the name of Jess Bradford answers to discover it is an obscene phone call from a person who has called before, whom the sorority has nicknamed the Moaner. Jess and the other sorority members listen as the caller rants and screams in strange voices before abruptly threatening to kill them. Upset by the call, a younger student named Claire Harrison decides to leave and goes upstairs to her bedroom to pack her suitcase. There, unbeknownst to the rest of the sorority, Claire is attacked by the killer hiding in her closet and killed. The following morning, Claire's father arrives, saying that Claire failed to meet up with him at a train station. House mother Miss McHenry offers to help Mr. Harrison look for her. Later that day, Jess informs her boyfriend Peter that she is pregnant and plans to undergo an abortion, much to his disapproval. Meanwhile, Harrison and two other sorority members, Barb and Phil, attempt to report Claire's disappearance to Sergeant Nash, who does not take them seriously at first until Chris Hayden, Claire's boyfriend, barges in angrily later in the day and demands something be done about it. A search party is later held that night for Claire, in which Mr. Harrison, Chris, and most of the sorority gets involved. Meanwhile, McHenry discovers Claire's body in the attic before the killer murders her with a crane hook. Shortly after, Jess answers another obscene phone call and decides to file a report with the police. Shortly thereafter, Lieutenant Fuller arrives with a telephone lineman to tap the phone so that the police can determine the identity of the harasser. After Fuller leaves, a group of Christmas carolers appear at the front door as Jess watches the killer sneaks into Barb's room and stabs her to death with a glass unicorn figurine, with her cries for help being drowned out by the carolers. Jess then receives another obscene phone call in which the caller emulates parts of an argument earlier she had with Peter. Lieutenant Fuller calls her to say the attempt to trace the call failed, and they both begin placing suspicion towards Peter. Jess and Phil decide to lock up every door and window in the house. Shortly after, however, Phil is murdered by the killer after finding Barb's body. Jess receives yet another obscene phone call, which is successfully traced by the police. Sergeant Nash instructs Jess to leave the house immediately as the calls are coming from inside the house. Jess goes to alert Barb and Phil, only to discover them dead. Jess sees the killer's eyes staring at her through a door crack before she slams the door against him and flee. The killer chases after her, and unable to open the front door, Jess runs into the basement, locking it behind her. Shortly after, though, Peter breaks through the basement window and slowly approaches Jess as he worriedly asks if she's okay. In a state of panic, Jess beats Peter to death with a fire poker, and the police find her barely conscious as she cradles Peter's body. The police later believe that Peter is the killer, and they put Jess to bed, leaving her alone in the bedroom with a police officer standing outside. However, the killer is still in the house, still alive. And when the movie ends, you see the attic door opening just a little bit. So, and that's how the movie ends. This movie was really, truly a great cinematic film in that it was given more of a chance than I would say another 1974 film that would later be released earlier released in 1974, and that being the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was seen more as a drive-in movie than Black Christmas was. I think if they would have ramped up more of it, though, or it could have been maybe had a better theater experience, I think this movie becomes the first slasher film, even before Halloween does, which is released 4 years later, 1978. But Black Christmas kind of suffers the same fate that Texas Chainsaw Massacre does, where it's pretty much almost forgotten except for people that truly love the genre, and that the movie did deal with some underlying tones like abortion, um, obscene phone calls, and I think a lot of people at that time weren't ready for what would later come with Halloween, and that was the slasher genre. Even though it wouldn't really get that name until much later with Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. But Black Christmas is definitely a great watch. They did remake it twice, and there's even a fan film out there called It's Me, Billy, A Black Christmas that brought back Olivia. I can't even say her last name, and I'm afraid to say the wrong thing, but it brings back her character in that movie, in that fan film, which a lot of people go like, oh, it's just a fan film. Sometimes fan films are even better than some of the other movies we got. And that's true for some of the Friday the 13th fan films like Roseblood, Never Hike Alone, Vengeance. The Vengeance movies are great. Roseblood is too. But yeah, Black Christmas, I feel should have been considered the very first slasher genre movie, but it wasn't. Sad, but true. Um, and plus, it was a Canadian horror film, so I don't think it really hit its stride here in America to where Halloween later does. And I hope that if people haven't seen this movie, they watch it and say, "Hey, you know what? This movie's actually really good." I mean, yeah, it does have, some shitty parts of it, yes. But in reality, the movie is very good. It's slow build, but once it starts building to the inevitable ending, it you can't go wrong with it. And John Saxon plays a wonderful police lieutenant in this movie. He later would in another horror movie, which was Nightmare on Elm Street. Um, Margaret Kidder would later go on to much bigger things like the Superman series. Art Hindle as Chris, another one that would go on to do movies with Chuck Norris and the other ones. Development. Black Christmas was initially developed by Canadian screenwriter Rob or Roy Moore, who wrote the screenplay under the title Stop Me. Inspirations for the film came from the urban legend known as The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs, which had become widespread during the 1970s. Moore claimed to have been inspired by a series of murders that occurred during the holiday season in the Westmount area of Montreal. As noted in an article for The Telegraph, the murders, which occurred in 1943, were perpetrated by a 14-year-old boy who bludgeoned several of his family members to death. Filmmakers Harvey Sherman and Richard Stoughton had Timothy Bond rewrite the script to give it a university setting. Clark, who had felt the original script was too much of a straightforward slasher film, made several alterations in dialogue and also incorporated humorous elements into the film, particularly the drunkenness of Barb and Miss Mac, the latter of whom Clark based on his aunt. Clark felt that college and high school students had not been depicted with any sense of reality in American film, and that he intended to capture the astuteness of young adults. College students, even in 1974, are astute people. They're not fools. It's not all bikinis, beach blankets, and bingo. Casting. Olivia Hussey, I think is her last name, who had previously garnered international fame for a role as Juliet in Franco Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet, signed on to appear in the film after being told by a psychic that she would make a film in Canada that would earn a great deal of money. Clark sought Kira Dooley to play the role of Peter based on his performance as David Bowman in 2001 A Space Odyssey. The role of Miss Mac was offered to Betty Davis, who declined the part. Margaret Kidder was cast in the role of Barb and said she had been attracted to the character because she was wild and out of control and not a conventional leading part. For the role of Claire Harrison, whose murder jumpstarts the film plot, Toronto native Lynn Griffin was cast after her mother, who was also her casting agent at the time, got her an audition. Griffin would later go on to star in Curtains and in the acclaimed television series Wind at My Back. Gilda Radner was offered the role of Phyllis Carlson. She accepted the part but dropped out 1 month before filming began owing to Saturday Night Live commitments and was replaced by Andrea Martin. The role of Lieutenant Fuller was originally given to Edmund O'Brien. Upon his arrival to the set, however, the producers realized he would be unable to fulfill the duties required of the part due to his failing health stemming from Alzheimer's disease. John Saxton, who had read the script prior, was called by the producers who offered him the role. He accepted it and had to arrive in Toronto from New York City within 2 days to begin shooting. Saxton had previously appeared in the first Galileo film, Mario Bava's The Girl Who Knew Too Much. Clark always intended to cast Saxton from the beginning as he was his first choice for the role, but miscommunications between Clark and Saxton's agent resulted in O'Brien being cast before Saxton officially came aboard the film. For the role of the film's antagonist, Italian-Canadian actor Nick Manscano was cast as one of the main voices in the phone call sequences. When auditioning for the role, director Clark had Manscano sit in a chair facing away from him so as not to see the actor's face. Clark then had Manscano experiment with different voices in order to come up with one that was right for the character, with Clark later offering him the part. The film was shot from the 25th of March to May 11th, 1974 at a cost of $686,000, equivalent to $3,707,542 in 2021, with $200,000 coming from the Canadian Film Development Corporation. The house featured in the film had been discovered by Clark while scouting for locations, and its owners agreed to lease the home for the production. Additional photography was completed on the University of Toronto campus. According to John Saxton, Clark had meticulously drawn out storyboards with key shots, which he brought to the film set each day. I could understand exactly what I thought he needed and the scene needed. Scenes in the film involving POV shot of Billy scaling the house was accomplished through the use of a rig designed by camera operator Bert Dunk, who was attached to Dunk's head, which was attached to Dunk's head as he climbed up the side of the house. Griffin's death scene, which was shot with a handheld camera in a real closet, was accomplished in only a couple of takes. According to Griffin, her character's surprise as the killer lunges from the closet was genuine. As the actress later recalled, it was a total shock because I didn't really know when to expect him to jump out. Shots of Claire's corpse in the rocking chair required the actress to wear an actual plastic bag over her head for extended periods of time. Griffin would also state that these scenes came relatively easy for her. I was actually and still am a fairly good swimmer, so I could hold my breath for a long time, and I could also keep my eyes open for a long time without blinking. Margaret Kidder remembered shooting the film as being fun. I really bonded with Andrea Martin filming in Toronto and Ontario. Olivia was a bit of an odd one. She was obsessed with the idea of falling in love with Paul McCartney through her psychic. We were a little hard on her for things like that. And the sad thing about this movie, the theatrical distribution, is that it actually had competition from The Godfather Part 2 and the James Bond movie, The Man with the Golden Gun. For its American release, the film was retitled The Silent Night, Evil Night due to fears that the original title would mislead audience into believing the film was a blaxploitation movie. They retracted the title after the initial release, restoring it to Black Christmas for subsequent screenings. And the film was the third highest grossing Canadian film of all time in Canada, with a gross of $2 million behind The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz and the French language directed by Claude Fonori. And so, as I said, this movie was supposedly an inspiration for John Carpenter's Halloween, and supposedly Clark wanted to do a sequel and suggested that the sequel would pretty much end up being what Halloween later became, in that it was a killer who was going after babysitters But I think Clark kind of disproved that theory, saying that the movies would have been similar with the name Halloween, but that was the ending of the similarities. And so, to all the people that think that John Carpenter ripped off another person's idea, that's just silly. And yeah, um, if you haven't seen the movie Black Christmas, watch it. You don't need to watch the remakes, which are so loosely based um, on the original that they're not even really worth it. And a funny note, um, that the main star Olivia later told Bravo during an interview about their 100 Scariest Movie Moments series that when she had met comedian Steve Martin for the first time, he later told her that she had starred in one of his favorite films of all time. So, well, she thinks that he's talking about Romeo and Juliet, but she was later surprised when Steve Martin said it was Black Christmas and that he had seen it 27 times. So, that's pretty cool. And also, if you want to see the It's Me Billy, a Black Christmas fan film, I do believe it's on um, YouTube. I haven't seen it yet, which I probably will later today. It's a very, from what I've heard, it's very good. So I may do a episode on that one after I watch it. But hopefully you did enjoy this. We are at 87 subscribers on our YouTube channel. If you haven't yet, please go over there, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and also comment. Give us some constructive criticism. Even tell us if we did a good job. We truly 100% appreciate it here at the Jarvis Podcast. Also, if you're looking for a video game channel, go over to twitch.com/TTVJarvis, where you'll see you'll see live streams of me playing video games and not doing very well. It's more like funny moments and rage, but it's something. And go check out kind of the group that I'm a part of and our one of my friends that does streaming on Twitch and also has a YouTube channel by the name of Salty Dalty, but his real name is Dalton S. I'm going to try and get him and his wife on the show and interview them. So hopefully you guys come back. Hopefully you guys love this episode that I did of the Black Christmas 1974 film. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Have fun and stay classy.